taught me how to live. Daddy taught me how to give. Both of them had their own sins. Down to the river, every man has felt the shame. All our blood, it runs the same. Father, hear us as we pray. Down to the river, down to the river. Sing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, going down deep, singing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, washing me clean, carry
Hi, welcome to the Cryptid Wilderness Research Podcast. I am CWR team member Daniel Becker up here in Anchorage, Alaska, staring into the Arctic abyss. And joining me, as always, my fellow host from Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater.
Hello.
Matt, what's going on?
The heat here is just, it's unbearable the last couple of days. We're closing in on 90 degrees. A couple of days it's going to be closing in on 100 degrees already in June. And it's oppressive.
Here in Anchorage, it's I think it's about 50 right now. It's been between about 44 and 50, and it's raining, and I believe I can hear the tourists weeping from here.
Send it down this way. Send it on down here.
Because, you know, when the tourists come, they think they purchase good weather with their ticket.
Right.
You know? So, and then when they get up here, they're like, oh my gosh, it's raining a lot, you know, but here in the Arctic, that's what happens.
That's what it does.
Yeah. So tonight, we're actually going to be talking to somebody from New England, which we have. I don't believe we've had anybody on from New England yet, Matt. Is that right?
So. I don't think we have.
Yeah. You know, I have some ties I have some ties in New England. Before I moved to Alaska, I was living in Boston, and I'd lived also in Connecticut for a year. So, you know, in New England, cryptids are an interest of mine. So this gentleman, his name is Colin Haskins. He's from the Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society. So let's bring Colin in.
Hi, guys. It's an honor to be here.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate it. As I was just talking to Matt here, I do not think we've had anybody on from New England before. So this is a treat for us. So thanks again for taking the time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor.
So let's start by having you tell us some things about you and how you got into all this, how you got into this area of cryptozoology.
Well, I'm an avid hiker, outdoorsman. I'm an advanced open water scuba diver, and I grew up in Maine, so in a hunting family. So outdoors is just second nature to me. And through the years, I've had some, like any outdoors person, let's say, anybody that's out in the wilderness a lot is going to have unexplained things. And I just had so many that I decided it was time to try my hand at this. I have an immature background in biology, and that helps a lot. And just some of my own encounters. And I was hesitant to start the group. I was very active in the arts for over 30 years. And then when I moved into this, so our Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society has been around for about 5 years. And in that time, we have upwards of 150 field investigations, and gotta be 50 or 60 on locations. So that's different. Those two things are different. So we'll go on location just to sort of check a cool place out, hiking trails, but we're always looking. And that's when we find a lot of evidence. And a field investigation is when we're out there gathering as much evidence as we can, and that evidence comes in the form of recordings, footprints, structures, X's, just odd things, tracks, and that much. Here, because of my background, I try to keep our investigations into sort of the realm of biology, but not empirical science because that's too rigid. So I'm open, and I've had a lot of experiences, and of course, our society is all about getting reports, and we're getting just some really, really cool, interesting reports out there. I had my own experiences about 20 years ago. I was tapping maple trees, and I had a squatch encounter, and it was a very large squatch, and that tends to be what's here in Connecticut. They tend to be extremely large and very powerful. I wouldn't say aggressive, but large. Just like
So
that.
take us to that encounter and tell us what happened.
All right, so now I was just doing my art thing, and I was coming home from work at the time. Now I lived in East Hartford, which is a suburb of Hartford. So we're talking a city, right? Just suburb of a capital city. But where I was across from a park, and there was this trail. It was a trout river that ran behind the apartments that I was living in, and the Hockanum River. And that Hockanum River goes up from Connecticut, goes to the Connecticut River, all the way up into Massachusetts, what would be Tungus State Forest. And so this is the last kind of place you would ever expect to see a squatch. This was off of an avenue with all kinds of restaurants and whatnot, apartments. It was developed. Now I was tapping maples, and I had just started doing that. And there was some really nice maple trees just behind the parking lot. But now this parking lot, this was an artificial, so they had sort of reclaimed the land, so it was flattened out. And then there was these crushed large bluestones like you would see along our highways. And like any apartment, that went straight down into the Hockanum River. I would say, you know, steeper than a 45-degree angle. And there was all kinds of tires and busted bottles and ripped up fencing and just gnarled pieces of metal and glass, and it was just like a junkyard back there, right? But the trees were awesome. So I'd set out my maple buckets. I don't know, you guys have birch up there, right? You make birch syrup. So it's very similar setup. And so I when you do this, you're dedicating about 2 weeks of your time every day to go check these buckets, and then you have to you have to boil them down to syrup. And I won't get into that, but and so I would come home from work, and it would be, so it's winter now. It's the end of February, which is around here in Connecticut prime maple season, beginning of March, and it's still, it was still daylight savings, so it's dark. By the time I got home, it was about 5:30, so it would be sort of dark. And it's unusual to tap maple trees in a suburb like that. It's not unheard of, but it's a little unusual. And so I'm walking off the apartment. I parked my car. Got to imagine about 100-foot parking lot. And then my taps, I was at the far end of that. So let's say 80 feet parking lot. And then my tap buckets would have been 10 feet in from there. So it was dark, and the trees are pretty big. So nobody goes back there, right? Of course not. It's dangerous. It's all busted glass. You wouldn't want to mess with that stuff. So I'm just thinking my own stuff, bills and whatnot, and going to check my buckets. And I was getting some really nice surfs. I was a little excited, and I was getting full buckets. So it was just that time of year. And as I'm approaching in there, I'm walking close. I'm like, oh, somebody's looking at my buckets, which didn't seem unusual to me because being in East Hartford, you just would be curious, like, what the heck is this crazy guy doing, Um, so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go over and talk to this person, explain. Maybe they want to ask some questions, maybe give them a bottle of syrup, whatever. Just be nice. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna, I noticed they were sort of crouching down. I was like, oh, okay, well, they're kneeling over. Well, they weren't kneeling over. When I approached, and this thing was looking at my bucket, like just staring at it. And when it sort of became aware that I was heading that way, it stood up. And when it stood up, it was gigantic. I mean, it was your monster squatch, right? Broad shoulders. Now, I couldn't make out a whole lot of facial features. The whole thing was a monotone sort of dark brown. What did happen though is this thing let out a howl like you wouldn't believe. Like, and I've heard Squatch responses. We have plenty of recordings of that, but not like this. This thing just, I never heard a noise like that. It just went straight down all through that glass, all through those busted tire rims, and just gnarled up barbed wire. And just, it was horrible. And it just knocking over these little sumac trees on its way, splashing in the water. It went up on the other side, which is very similar because there was another apartment complex on the other side of the river with the same sort of situation. And this thing then just walked on from the other side of the river, and it walked along that bluestone, which would have then brought it up into the Hockanum Linear Trail and a nice escape route into Massachusetts. That was my first experience, and it was still, even now that I investigate, that was my best experience. It scared the living crap out of me.
So you said it had the broad shoulders. Did it have the no neck that we often hear about?
Yeah, I didn't see any sort of, it didn't have that sort of elongated neck that we have. And then I got a pretty good look at it. It didn't stick around. It was very upset. It was mad that I saw it, but I got enough of a look at it that I knew it wasn't a bear. There's plenty of bears here. We don't have a bear hunting season. And, there was just no mistaking it. I mean, it stood up, hominid, bipedal, and walked down through that stuff, ran sort of down through that stuff, knocking trees over. And yeah, no, it was a squatch. It was your typical squatch like you would see, except I would say more like a football player, sort of broader chest, just muscular. Like, wow, impressive creature, big.
Would you describe the head as more cone-like or more rounded? How would you describe the skull features?
To me, it didn't come to a point. Sort of tapered, rounded, almost like you see the elongated skulls, right, on people, from Egypt and stuff, and the Americas. It sort of tapered back. It was pretty furry. Remember, now we're in February, so any animal out there, any animal at all, is going to have longer hair at that time of year. I don't care if you're a primate or a rabbit. You're just gonna. That's just the nature of biology. So it was pretty
Did you?
furry. I guess I
Yeah.
didn't get a sense of the pre-sagittal crest that these anthropologists talk about, but it definitely was not rounded like ours. Okay, it was odd.
Did you notice
Yeah.
any scent at all?
I get asked that question all the time, guys. And for whatever reason, no, I didn't. And I have not yet experienced that. And in the 5 years of CCIS with hundreds of reports, only one describes that foul smell. Only one. And I just, maybe it's because it's cold here. Maybe they don't have that necessary biological defense for what, maybe it's their diet. Maybe it's the amount of water. There's just water everywhere in Connecticut. There's streams and rivers everywhere. And if they're in that a lot, that's going to reduce the smell. I really don't. You don't get and I'm in the forest a lot. You don't get a lot of animal smells in our forests. So it's just, I don't know. It doesn't happen here a lot.
So when you first saw this creature, did you know immediately what you were looking at? What's going through your mind? A lot of people that we talk to, and I'm sure you've talked to as well, say that when they have that first encounter, they just at first they just can't process what they're seeing. So when you had that encounter, what were you thinking?
Well, like I said, I was approaching. I wanted it to be. I thought it was a big person. Um, I thought it was a man, and I was like, all right. My thing was, I'm gonna go approach. I want this to be friendly. I don't want to be like, hey, knucklehead, get out of my buckets. You know, this is East Hartford. You wanna approach lightly. Um, when I saw it standing up, I'm like, oh, it's a big guy. And when it kept standing up, okay, and I'm like, that my only first I remember freezing in place, just looking at it. There must have been a half a second where we just sort of each other like, oh, it was like, oh crap, you know. Um, I just, it was just an amazing thing. I really don't have adequate words. It's typical Squatch, but um, as it stood upwards, it stood to right next to my buckets, right next to the maple tree was a hemlock tree, and hemlock trees break off the lower branches. So I was able to go after, and I had to go back in there day after day. Right, this scared me, but I had to go back in there. So I went and measured it, and it was a little over, I'd say 9 feet some odd inches, and it's hard to tell. And it was snow on the ground. But yeah, I mean, once I made eye contact with it, I knew that wasn't a person. Could have passed for my cousin Tubby up in Lubec, Maine. Could have been him. Well, he's pretty squatchy, but no. All kidding aside, I knew after my initial shock. Remember, now I was not into this at the time. I was just into my nature and art. And as things go, as this thing's standing up after 7 feet or so, I'm like, that's not a person. And then that's howling, and that voice was deep and angry, and it's just, I could almost feel it, you know. You definitely know, at least I knew in my encounter, that's not a person. I was close enough to this thing to know that is not a human being. And I mean, so I knew it was an upright hominid. I mean, and I was able to sort of piece it together rather quickly, like, oh my goodness, I had a Squatch encounter in East Hartford, Connecticut. It's crazy.
So one more question for me before I throw the ball over to Matt. Uh, what did the eyes look like? Were they solid black? What did you notice about the eyes?
What I noticed about the entire creature was that it was monochrome. I'm a professional painter, house painter, and an artist. I have a pretty good concept of color. I've been working with color over 40 years. It was monochrome in a way I can't explain. There was no variation in the color. It was just solid dark brown. I would say burnt umber or dark walnut to be specific, if I was going to match that color. Squatch brown. So yeah, I did not notice any difference in the eye color, in the nose. It was all a solid field of dark brown. Now, I mean, I knew it was looking at me, right? But I couldn't see any kind of that distinctive featuring. Where you would say the flattened nose, your typical, your gorilla type forehead, sunken eyes. I get those reports all the time, but this thing just appeared like a wall of brown, but muscular.
Wow, what an encounter. Matt, what do you think?
That sounds pretty incredible. And just how going in there, it's just off a parking lot in a city, and you're going to check your buckets. So when you went to approach this creature, how close did you get? Would you say?
All right, so like I said, I would estimate the whole parking lot, and this is not yards, so we're talking feet, okay?
Yeah.
So maybe 2 40-foot ladders. So maybe the whole parking lot was 80 feet. All right. And then I was parked maybe 10 feet from the end of it. So now we've brought it down to 70 feet. I would say when we sort of, when it became, I was aware of it. So there would have been a lot of human activity there, and it probably was so used to being there, no one ever noticed it. It's sort of weirdly dark in there. Um, I got where I was, so I must have walked halfway. I must have been 35 feet away from it. It was big.
Yeah, that's really close.
When when it stood up, I saw it there, and I was just like, all right, like I said, I'm just gonna go talk to this person.
Yeah,
But when these things go from crouching to standing up, holy moly! I mean, they are towering, guys. You are instantly humbled and kind of scared.
definitely.
I was,
And that was really close, especially with the roar. You know, it's
it was mad. I think
oh
it
yeah,
was mad that I saw it. If I had to sort of speculate,
yeah.
Was it bearing teeth at you at all?
yeah. Well, when it howled, that's the only time I sort of. It was getting dark, but that was the only time the color changed, and you could see some sort of pristine white in there. Yeah, yeah. And I would say sort of like our extended canines here, a little bit extended. Definitely not fangs like a dog man. Your typical primate, like a silverback gorilla, is going to have stuff like that. It's not like a gorilla though. They're more anatomically similar to us in the way their posture is. At least it's the one that I saw. Right, I got a good look at it. And I'm sure many years later, that had a lot to do with why I started CCIS.
So were you able to tell if it was a male or a female, or was it all just kind of a lot of hair and really not able to distinguish?
I was not able to distinguish, and my brain just didn't process it like that. If I
Sure.
had to speculate, again, the low pitch to me sounded very, very alpha male. Probably, so what happens in some of these primate communities is as they mature, the males will get driven out, and they have to sort of start a new territory and get a whole new clan going. Not all primates, some of them. And maybe that was a male that got pushed out of the clan ready to start his own, and maybe pushed into someplace crazy like the Hockanum Linear Trail. A lot of food there, by the way.
So you've had this amazing encounter, and take us from there and lead us into the the study part of it when you really dove into it.
So when I started CSIS, I was at a place, a very, very beautiful place, Seville Dam Artificial Impoundment. If you go to Connecticut, the tourism, you're going to see pictures of that thing. It's beautiful. It's in Barkhamsted. And I was with a friend, and we're just sort of seeing these, if you kind of like manatees, okay? They were moving, but slowly. I would say they were about the size of a manatee. And they weren't making any water disturbances. There was about three of them. They like dark gray, almost perfectly. You guys, do you have diving beetles up there? Do you know what diving beetles look like? These little black bugs that skirt around on the water. Okay, they're almost perfectly oval and black. So imagine this thing. I'm gonna say 6 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, sort of almost perfectly oval. And I was like, well, we're seeing this. Nobody's there. And, we're like, what the heck is that? So after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start. I'm going online looking for stuff in Connecticut. There's nothing, right? There's just a couple things. People have tried some things. There's a few people that had some books out, but I just felt like it wasn't enough, And so listen. They're the pioneers. Um, but CSIS, I wanted a much, much more thorough approach. I wanted to do investigations. I wanted to delve into histories, kind of like what you guys do. And so we call that I was able to observe those things in the water. I would estimate about submerged about 6 feet underwater and being stationary, and, holding buoyancy, if you will, for divers talk. And just sort of interacting slowly with each other, moving towards where I was, towards the shoreline, but not close enough. So after that, we kind of coined that as civility. Not sure what it is. Really, there's just nothing that I found like it. And I haven't seen it since. I've gone to the dam several times. There's this little pullover, right? This little oval pullover right by the water. And it was approaching dark. And that's what started CCIS. And I was a little hesitant. I was like, wow, this is going to flop, right? Nobody's going to find this interesting. Well, just the opposite happened. And now we're getting a nice constant stream of reports. We've been to conventions. We're having a great time with this, like podcasting you guys. And by the way, I want to thank you again and thank your audience. And we're humbly honored to be here.
Well, again, we appreciate having you. And, our viewers always love stories like yours, and someone who came into this field of study from having their own encounter. And your encounter was extremely vivid. And so absolutely amazing story. Now you're in Connecticut. What section of the state are you in?
So we're up in the northwest corner, Litchfield County. And so we're bordering Massachusetts and New York. And so there's a lot of activity here, not just in Connecticut, but in the Hudson Valley. The Hudson Valley investigators, wow, they got some crazy stuff. And we're sort of that's an overlap, that between the Hudson River and the Connecticut River. And we're in that northwest corner. So this is where in Connecticut you start to get mountainous. This is the foothills of the Berkshires. This is the area where the Winstead wild man was reported in the 1800s. We did a whole bunch of investigations on that. We went to those locations and I found some crazy footprints. And that guy's still there. The only difference between Bigfoot and the Winstead wild man, and I was able to contact the historians, the Winstead historians. I got, telephone book of documents. One of the documents, and several report this, the Winstead wild man jumped out as people were picking blueberries. And your typical wild man had a club, a wooden club, right? We're talking 1800s here. And jumped in front of this one farmer and asked him which way to town. Now the farmer's shocked, right? He points to town, and the wild man heads in the other direction. That just could be an overlap of legends, but the Winstead wild man is very squatchy. And if you do an aerial survey of Winstead, Connecticut, what you're going to find is that the city, there's sort of these fingers, that this forested area that sort of fringes the city. It's not really a city, it's a town. And there's all these spots where you can just run from forested area to forested area to forested area. But in between, you'd have urban settings. And when I did the aerial, Google Earth, it's so easy enough to do. You'd be like, yeah, I could see why something may be, again, like it happened in East Hartford, where some of these things that happen in urban settings might be alpha males pushed out and unfamiliar with the territory and get seen, just normal stuff, just going from wooded area to wooded area. That's what I think the Winstead wild man is. The historical report of it talking, you just got to say, well, I just don't need that 2 reports out of the several hundred. So I just put that in the weird category.
Right. Matt, we have some pictures. Let's bring those up.
Yeah.
So as we bring these up, why don't you lead us through these and tell us what's happening?
So we got the title page right here.
Logo. I'm just seeing the logo from CCIS. Oh, Okay, so this is me at a convention. So my shout out to Nicholas Robert Grossman and Mr. Haunted. They're kind enough to give us these conventions, and we get a lot of reports at these conventions. People love coming up to us. So that's what you're seeing there. Same thing. There's me doing, I forget, any number of field investigations. That's where we went to a platform in Litchfield overlooking Bantam Lake. Really cool.
Nice.
Okay, so that's a footprint. That measured 18 inches long, and it was about, I'd have to say, 8 inches deep. We didn't have a measuring thing on us at the time. We were on location. Okay, so that's different from a field investigation. This is a series of footprints, and this material, now there's a river right there. So this is a tall grass, and in that is mud, about 2 or 3 feet of mud. So whatever stepped in that compressed it down, and it made that in a series of other prints that were separated by 5 feet at least. I tried to do the gate, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't get my legs to stretch that far, and I'm 6 feet tall. And that was where we found this crazy nest, which will be in a couple of other photographs. So that's a footprint, a large one.
Yeah.
These are our X structures that we're finding a lot in Connecticut, and they're getting a lot of these in the Hudson Valley. Sort of seems to be a common thing. Markers and the bent trees. I talked to loggers about this, and so I like to talk to loggers and hunters and rangers. You're going to get good information there. And I asked him if he encountered these things, and he said, "Yeah, we see a lot of these things." And I never paid no mind to it, other than we all think they're kind of weird and odd. But you're on a job site, and he said, "Now that I've seen your videos, I wish I'd paid more attention." We also get teepee structures, which tend to be a little bit smaller. There's another X, and this is from Nancy Danaher Land Trust in Torrington, just down the road from us here in Litchfield. And what I was able to crawl under this, and there's a little like a dugout, and between that tree and just past that big tree would have is a game trail. So I speculate that was a blind for a squatch to hide and then ambush something. That's another footprint, I believe. Oh, see, I'm looking on a phone, so that looks like the bedding, another bedding area. Yeah, that's Nancy Danaher, and so these beddings, this could be deer bedding because there was a series of them. So what we're showing you here is a forage base, a lot of deer, and they'll bed down like that. They like the grasses to conceal themselves. Okay. This thing was
Wow.
where I told you this is along the Bantam River in a place called White Memorial. There's no hunting in here, and it is vast. The acreage for Connecticut is vast. This structure, we went to this sort of out of the way places. You have to go off trail a lot. And I don't advise people to do that because I don't want to have any liability, but we have to. And when I
Yes.
came up, we were almost going to give it, me and camera person. So we almost were just disappointed. We're in this field. They have these fields that they mow for bobwhites and other native birds and other like rabbits and stuff. So they make these fields. They're not harvesting hay. They just mow them, leave them high, but they mow them. And we're at the far end of this field. It's like, what the heck are we doing? And I'm like, let's just give it one more shot. So we went to the very end of the field. And this is, so behind that structure is the Bantam River. This thing was large enough for me to walk into, stand up, and it still had another foot over my head. So the height of this thing, and if you go to our videos, we measured to 7 feet, and the width of it had to be a good 12 feet. and it's like that all around. And the backside is like, it's not like that. That's hollow. So that's an entrance. On the backside is a solid wall. It's almost like an igloo made of grass. And where you saw the footprint, that native grass is very tall. We have a lot of hay fields, so hay turns wild and it just grows tall. But that we speculate is a nesting area, and the tracks then were going away from it. By the time we found it, it was abandoned. We looked for hair, and the tracks would have been heading deep, deep into White Memorial, into some crazy muck, almost quicksand. And the muck there, it's that kind of muck. If you step into it, you lose your shoe. You're never going to get it back. We've all had that.
Right.
So that we're calling the nest. Speculate because there's no hunting there, that's a nursery for juveniles to raise their young, to when they're big enough they can migrate.
That's a fantastic find. Matt, you ever seen one quite like this?
Not anything quite like this, and especially not something this complete.
Oh, the thing is crazy. We went back there, and in November, after snow, and it was still there. I mean, that thing, that's a shelter. And I'm telling you guys, listen, the kind of, when they mow these fields, it isn't like it's grass. There's these little sticks, all of these brambles, and they're sharp. They're, maybe 2 inches off the ground. So to walk on that stuff is very uncomfortable. Nobody really, we almost gave up ourselves, and we're used to that. That thing was in just the middle of nowhere.
Wow, what a great find.
Thanks. That's another footprint. I think now I'm looking at these images on my phone. I think we put an object down to give you a measurement, maybe a lighter or something.
Yeah, there's a pair of glasses next to it.
So that and that would have been in the same area, but that particular, now it's a little further away from the river there. That's the soil there is rigid. So whatever, I tried making a print and nothing. So whatever made that impression, you're talking at least a 500-pound creature.
Yeah, that's the last one in the slideshow.
It's huge.
Yeah, that had to have been huge in order to push the dirt down that far. With rigid,
So other
rigid
stuff we're
ground.
finding are these trees, hardwoods that are juvenile hardwoods. So they're saplings, but I'd say you could they're about this big, so 4 inches wide. And then you'll see these breaks, right? So I have to reach all the way up. And remember, we're talking about a 4 to 5 inch trunk. And then the tree is snapped and twisted. And you can see the twist marks. I see plenty of tree fall all day long. The twisting is hard to explain. And I'm just trying to piece this together in my head. What is this? Well, what I think, so when you twist the tree, it's like a clock. You can go in any direction, 360 degrees. What is the break? The break is always away from the trail on a 45. So the trail's here, and this is the break. What I kind of thought was, this is showing a direction. So I started following in that direction. And sure enough, maybe a little ways in the woods, just out of sight, there's another one snapped and going in the same direction. And they'll do that until they change direction. And then those ones will go in the same direction, almost as if it's saying, go this way. We see that a lot. I have plenty of photographs. You'll find plenty of those. And whatever did that had to have opposable digits, hands, and had to be so strong, it's ridiculous. Saplings, those hardwoods, sometimes they're doing it to oak trees. It's crazy. They seem to prefer maples, and they don't ever do it to the softwoods.
So before I ask you,
never counted that.
So before I ask you about other cryptids in Connecticut and New England, let me ask you this Bigfoot specific question. After having had your encounter, after becoming a researcher and hearing all the reports and being in the field, and there's no wrong answer, but what do you think these creatures are?
So I really looked into this, and like I say, guys, I I I don't want to rule out any of this paranormal behavior with Bigfoot. It's just not where I'm coming from. What I think you're looking at, well, there are 89 known types of hominids in empirical science and Western science. We know of 89. That's a lot. From small, the Fiji man, all the way up to Australia and Gigantopithecus and others. What I think you're looking at is a highly intelligent hominid, very closely related to humans. That is, again, doesn't we humans have a calcified pineal gland? Okay, and what that does is that limits our sixth and seventh senses. I don't want to speculate what those are, but it limits our pineal gland's functions. No other animal on Earth has that. That happened to us artificially. So you're looking at a large hominid, camouflaged. That's its habitat, and it's very able to hide from you. I mention this a lot, so I know of a lot of the animals in the woods of Connecticut. For example, a porcupine. I've never physically seen a porcupine in Connecticut. Doesn't mean they're not there. But to specifically answer your question, you're dealing with a hominid that has the voice ranges are so low they can affect your comfort. So that's one thing. I think they're very adapted biological beings. This stuff with portals, well, they can disappear. Any animal really can disappear. You look at a raccoon 5 feet in the woods, you're gonna it'd be very easy to miss it. I think you're dealing. There's some real interesting stuff with the Anunnaki history and Bigfoot, and I'm really leaning towards some of that. So I don't like to do this, but it could be a genetic experiment and that escaped and was much more able to adapt. It would have been one of the earlier versions when they settled on us as their workers, whatever. And I don't like to get into that. You're dealing with a primate that perhaps has some level of telepathy because of its uncalcified pineal gland. And their pineal gland would be much larger than ours. And here's the kicker. If it has a presagittal crest and an elongated skull, it's got a bigger brain than us guys. No one's ever mentioned that. It's got a larger brain capacity than us.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and theories about Bigfoot. Now, we wanted to ask you about other possible cryptids in Connecticut and throughout New England. Tell us some about that and what kind of signs that you've come across in your research areas.
So right now, ever since Linda Godfrey's book, The Beast of Bray Road, everybody wants to know about Dogman. We do have one Dogman report. We have one going back to 1997. We got a report of a Mothman and a tragedy. And there was a death, a recent death, 3 people driving in a car. It's a pretty long story. But so there's tragedy. There's a death, a recent death. And the daughter of this guy that died had a cell phone that was dead. It was dead. And it started ringing. Okay. I mean, it's just her dad's cell phone. It's ringing. Okay. That's just odd. It's not anything paranormal. It's just odd. But then they had this Mothman coming over their car, and they described it as you would hear a typical Mothman. But here's the kicker. They didn't know what it was. They had no idea about Mothman. They didn't have any idea this creature existed. They had no contact with any of the movies or culture or any of that when they reported it to me. They had to look it up. And this is 1997. So this is the beginning of the web. And they figured out that this was a real close parallel. And that happened in Kent Falls, which is up in our area. And Kent Falls is a popular tourist attraction, and it's very close to a lot of the reports, some of the reports that the BFRO gets. And it's interesting. Every year they come here. They come here every year and have a camp out, and you can join them. And good for them. We're a little different. I was talking to you guys about the Black Dog of Meriden.
Right.
Meriden Mountain. Meriden is a town in Connecticut, and it's known for this tower, Hubbard Park, and Castle Craig. It's called. There's a highway, so you can see this tower built on this cliff edge. And these cliffs are built of trap rock. They're extremely dangerous. It's the highest point of land on the entire East Coast, within 25 miles of the Atlantic Ocean. The mountain itself is very unusual. I was talking to the town historian about this. So briefly, let's talk about the black dog. It won't stand it too long. And the legend is there's this ghost dog. And if you see this little guy, he'll bark, but you won't hear him. You'll see him walking, but he won't leave any footprints. And the first time you see it is for joy. You're happy. The second time you see it is for sorrow. Something sort of bad happens. And the third time is, of course, the clincher is death. Well, and so if you just go look at it, I mean, there's a lot of history, and you don't have time, we don't have time. But if you look up that Black Dog of Meriden, several of these two geologists, I'm sorry, from Yale, and I'm gonna say the 20s, and I think that's the right timeline. Of course, they would go to Meriden Mountain because of the unique geology. The whole thing is it just sort of lifts up, right? It's almost like that Devil's Tower. It's just an unusual thing. And so they're going to go there and they're going to study this stuff. And they have these encounters with the dog. One guy saw it once with joy. He brings his friend. Now he wants his friend to go study with him, and he mentioned this weird dog. The legend, remember, they didn't know about this legend. It was just forming. They were part of the whole beginning of the legend. It goes back further. They were sort of the popularization of this legend. And it's Connecticut specific. So now these two are there together, and they're climbing up this crazy outcropping. And you just wouldn't want to do it because the stuff falls away all the time. And it's violent. So the cliff face gives way. They see the dog. So now this guy's happy. I'm sorry, I got jumped ahead. So they both see this dog appears at the top of this cliff face. So, hey, this is great. This is what I wanted to see. So initially, they're both kind of happy. And one guy's climbing up ahead of the other guy. The other guy just saw him for the first time. So the guy that saw him for the second time is climbing up a little bit ahead. And the whole freaking cliff face falls down on him. And he's broken bones and really messed up, guys. Nothing happened to the other guy. Okay? Years later, they decide they're going to go again. Okay, these are knucklehead geologists, so this is what they're going to do. And they're not knuckleheads. I'm a knucklehead. But they should have known better. Right? I mean, they understand the nature of these rocks, and it's a sheer cliff face. You're going up maybe 600 feet. It's no joke. You're not going to survive. They decide they're going to go again for whatever reason. So there they go again. And again, the guy that had the injuries is leading the hike up, scaling up, with their 20s climbing gear. And they're both involved in a crash now. The same thing happens. The mountain face gives way. The guy that saw They see the dog. I'm sorry, they're there. They see they see the dog. So they climb up. They disregard the dog. Now, the guy that saw the dog for the third time, remember, they're both involved in this cliff face crumbling away. Well, he's dead. And his buddy is really physically messed up from the reports. He's in the hospital and he's suffering really bad injuries, but he recovers. And years go by, and he decides he wants to go honor his friend, right? He's going to go honor his geologist friend where he died. So he's climbing up the mountain. And I mean, you know what happened, right? The whole thing gives away. And sure enough, he dies. It's crazy. We went there. We go there a lot. We went there to investigate up by the tower now. And I'm thinking, all right, 3 times, first time for joy, second time for sorrow, third time for death. So these things are happening in threes. And I'm like, it's a little dog. I've seen this guy. I used to live in Meriden. I've seen a little spaniel there. I can't even believe I went back to investigate it, but I did. I don't even know why. So in my head, I'm like, how can you see this dog and sort of break the cycle? I'm like, well, let's leave it a gift. So it's a dog. And I'll leave it 3 dog biscuits. And that's just, now I'm creating this new modern twist to this. And this has no basis in history. I just invented this right off the top of my knucklehead. And we're leaving these dog biscuits right there at the base of a flagpole. Exactly 1 week later, a woman falls off that exact flagpole. And no, I don't know if the dog was involved at all. No one knows, because she was so messed up. She's still alive. She can't speak properly. This happened last year. She's in a lot of, she was in critical condition, brain injuries, physical injuries, and it's all very sad. So Black Dog of Meriden, totally cool, unique to Connecticut and Meriden Mountain. And oh, by the way, about those, it's not just Meriden Mountain, it's Black Mountain. There's a little mountain range there, and one of them is Black Mountain, Mount Lamentation, Mount Misery, Dog Misery, Black Pond. It's all sorrow. It's all sorrow. When we do our investigations, every animal we encounter is black. Black squirrels. It's crazy.
Very interesting. So, Colin Haskins from Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society. We really appreciate you. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Before I throw the ball over to Matt to close us out, as we're getting close to time, where can our viewers find you on social media?
Oh, all over the place. We're on all of them. Facebook, YouTube. You type in, look at the CCIS, Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society, CCIS-CT. Connecticut Cryptids. You just type in any search, you're going to find us.
You have got some fascinating stories and some great research, and we definitely want to have you back for a part 2. And yeah, just absolutely fantastic encounter story that you had, and thank you for sharing your thoughts, opinions, and theories. And like I said, we definitely want to have you back for a part 2 if you're willing to do so. And let me throw the ball over to Matt to close us out here.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. Your fascinating stories. Your encounter was so intense and vivid. I felt like I was there with you in that parking lot, seeing that squatch up close.
Yeah.
And just thank you for coming on and sharing your information, sharing your story, and letting everybody know where they can find all your research materials and stuff and all your information.
Oh,
and it's great.
I'm going to share. Listen, if I can keep, you got to have this one. This one will round you out. I'll just do it within a minute. We got a report coming back from the 70s of they were camping in a Black Rock State Park campground, and this Bigfoot comes screaming in at night into their campground, kicked the freaking fire, right? Fire sparking all over the place, and threw a dead raccoon at one of the people and hit him with it. So there's a report of Bigfoot using a biological weapon in Connecticut.
That's great.
That's a close encounter.
Yeah, that's one I haven't. That's a type of account I've not heard before.
Yeah.
So
I think that one's unique. We got a report from Oklahoma of a Bigfoot throwing an armadillo. And we speculated that because they're more around, they would be a better animal to throw.
really,
Makes sense.
yeah, I've only heard of them throwing rocks and logs. That's
Right.
but yep. Now I've heard a new one. That's awesome. It's always love
If you
hearing.
go into our videos and find that one, we did the whole mathematical chart, like an artillery chart, velocity, height, the weight of the raccoon. Oh, I had a great time. We were in tears laughing on that one. But it really happened, according to this person.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check. Definitely going to check that out, and definitely interested in seeing more of what's to come. You know, what's around the bend tomorrow. You know, you've done some great research, and we're looking forward to seeing what else you come up with.
Oh, and likewise, thank you guys. Maybe we'll flip this coin and maybe I'll interview you guys and talk about, have you guys had encounters?
I've seen one footprint, and I believe I've had a rock thrown at me.
Nice. I haven't had anything thrown at me yet. I'm a little jealous.
Yeah.
And as far as I go, you know, I've heard them scream and found the tracks and got a really good picture, not off a game camera, but actually off of my camera. Got a really good picture of one in Arkansas, but I'm still waiting to have that direct encounter, and I'm hoping one day it will take place.
Yeah, I'll tell you, and you're in Alaska, so you know damn well to be careful when you're hiking backwoods. Find yourself a little stream and get off trail. That'll give you a sense of direction, and then follow it back out to your main trail. And I find a lot of activity that way. I find a lot of weird evidence. Instead of using a game trail, follow a little stream where nobody goes. Maybe give it a quarter mile. You're going to start seeing stuff almost every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I prefer to do the Alaska stuff in the fall, when the bears have had their fill of salmon and they're all nice and fat, and they're you know, starting to look for their hibernation dens. I've gotten out a couple of times already this spring, and now we're entering summer. Obviously, I've gotten out a couple of times, but and then I'm going to head down to Arkansas in October and link up with our partners down there, and that's where we do the real heavy duty stuff. And of course, with the weather improving, Matt out there in the Pacific Northwest is going to be getting back out into the field.
I used to live in Arkansas. I lived in Blytheville, right off the Mississippi River.
Arkansas, I call the Amazon of America,
Definitely.
because of the thickness of the forest. And every time that I have gone down there with our partners, they're named William Lunsford and Stephen Hill, and every time I've been out with them, we've had activity. You know, every time.
I'm not surprised. Were you in the Ozarks?
We were just outside of Falk,
Oh,
so Legend of Boggy Creek area.
right. The Falk Monster.
Yeah, and you know, it's really interesting. I was on a show recently as a guest, and one of the things I noticed with the topic of Bigfoot and cryptids in the South versus the North is that in the South, you know, they were more open to talk about it. You know, that was my experience, at least, you know, being out there in the small towns in the country. You know, the topic wasn't off the table for them because they'd grown up hearing the stories, and some had even had their own encounters, you know, but talking about it up here in Alaska, not so much. You get more scoffing and laughter, but down in the South, people seem more open to it.
They're fairly open to it in my area. But Connecticut's
That's good.
very conservative. People here really keep to themselves, and it's all about being proper. And the last thing you'd want to do, and I call it the cultural ridicule, is give my story. You wouldn't want to do that. I don't care at this point. Go ahead, and I'm the crazy person. I really don't care. That's what I saw, and I'm just going to admit it. But you don't want to lose your job. You don't want your. There's a fella here in Connecticut. He published a book. He didn't really go about it right, um, but he alienated himself from his family. He alienated himself from his wife. They got divorced. He had this encounter, and he just got obsessed with it. Just so obsessed that his whole life fell apart. It's sad. I
Yeah.
contacted him, and he was just very, very, very hesitant to talk to me. Geez, I'm just trying to. I have a lot to share too. It's like you guys. You got to share information.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Colin, we know it's a little bit later there than it is where we are in our part of the country. And so, again, thanks for joining us and sharing your story. And it was absolutely fantastic. And we definitely want to have you back for part two.
I'd love
So,
that.
thanks
Maybe
again.
we could talk about puck wedgies and stuff. That would be great. The other cryptids.
Yeah, there's a lot of area that we still want to cover about Connecticut and New England. So, yeah, let's definitely get something planned. So, for myself, Daniel Becker up here in Anchorage, Alaska, staring into the Arctic abyss. For my partner in Quincy, Washington, Matt Slater. And once
Thank you,
again,
guys.
Colin Haskins. We will see you again for part two.
Guys, I really appreciate it. Thank your audience. You guys are true gentlemen. Anytime you want to go squashing with us, you got an invitation to come here and stay in Connecticut.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir. And likewise for us. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.